Dear listeners, welcome to episode 12 of Thinking Psychologist. Till now, what we have seen is our human brain is being boggled by attention grabbing elements outside our world, where there are advertisements, where there are events happening outside that spark some enthusiasm, creativity, and ideas inside our head. And those ideas govern our life, our future. We have met Buddhist monks, we have met clinical psychologists, we have met people who are lucid dreaming experts, and a lot of storytelling people as well. But today's session is going to be really really interesting. What we're going to be delving today is at the core of product development, and the new products and innovations are at the heart of what new organizations are trying to do, trying to reinvent themselves. With that being said, we would like to invite Ruello Giovanni on the show. Giovanni, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Just a
Hi,
little bit
everyone.
intro about Giovanni is that he is an expert at service design and user experience. He has worked in multiple roles across the globe in terms of user design and service experience, service designs, as well as me and Giovanni had a pleasure of working together on a very, very innovative role in which we were looking at the disruptive models that can disrupt a large automotive multinational of the globe. With that being said, our association was towards the disruption and innovation. But in today's theme, we're gonna be talking about how a service designer looks at designing a perfect user experience. And to design that, how does he go towards understanding the needs of the audience? And to understand the needs, how do you actually go and find the real need? And what is the user actually thinking when the needs are being done? With that, we will start with the introduction of Giovanni, and we will ask him to tell us briefly about himself, what has his been journey has been from Italy, where did he study, what all places he has worked in, and what has been the impacts that have, things that have impacted his life, and why did he choose this role first of all? Please, Giovanni, all you.
Yeah, yes, as you said, I was born and raised in Italy, and in the my hometown in Sicily. This is where I also studied electronic engineering. But I believe I do have also a creative DNA because I wanted to sketch comics. That was my largest passion. So I had a lot of interest in how things are done, but also how things work. And I've been carrying on this two interests mostly in parallel. And when I was working in my first assignment as a business consultant for IT areas in Italy, and then in 2012 I moved to Germany, and then those two paths they started to merge together. And back in the days, this is where I found this new area, which is as you mentioned, service design. And I'll try to clarify what service design is. It's not easy. And since then I was able to merge those two, because service design is exactly this practice of designing services, which are intangible business interactions that we usually have with some provider of something which is fulfilling one of our needs. But in order to do service design, you need to thoroughly combine three fundamental aspects. One is the business viability. Can we make money out of it? The other one is the technological feasibility. Can we build it somehow? And the third one, and which is the turf, so to say, I'm into, is it desirable? So will people buy it? Will people find value in this thing that we're building? And so the constant exercise in service design is exactly to move on those three different pillars. And we designers, we are coming more from the human perspective to it. But nevertheless, you need those links to the business and to the technology in order to implement, in order to launch your deliver value to your customers.
So
And
just to stop you one over here, the thing that you're trying to say is that the vital component in service design is finding the value that your service is going to provide to the customers. So just coming a little two steps back and trying to understand what service means when it comes to service design is these are the intangible interactions that my prospective customer is going to have with my product. Is that in one line can be said as a service design?
Yes, I mean, as I said, there are different definitions, and it has fuzzy boundaries. What I really like is the definition of a fellow service designer, Mark Fontaine, saying when you have two coffee shops in the same road selling the same exact type of coffee with the same exact price, service design, it walks you what allows you to walk in just one of those two, um, get go there often and tell all your friends how great this place is.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's a good explanation.
yeah, it's a very good explanation, and then this is the point. I mean, I don't really like iceberg relationship or comparison, but at the end, most of the times we interact with services nowadays mostly through this thing, but it's just one way to interact or your major interaction point. But behind this, there is a huge invisible also structure which is has to be synchronized, orchestrated in order for you to enjoy that single order on your favorite e-commerce website, for example. So it's just how do you reduce barriers for your customers to interact with your services, but also how do you engineer your processes and your organization in order that everything can happen in a seamless way. In interesting wise, the easiest sometimes is the easiest the interaction at the visible level, the more complex is then the activities that you need to do behind the scenes as you were in a theater, to make this play happen and make your audience successful and make your audience happy.
So Wani, I'm curious to know, once you talk about these two coffee shops and person going and buying from one and rather than going to the second one, what are the major KPIs that would be defined to have an awesome service? If you take an example per se,
Mm-hmm.
how would you compare a service from one portion to another? Because I understand that there is the quality of the product, then there is the customer service of the product, then there is how is the ambience and stuff like. But putting them into a numbers and defining a KPI into numeric words and defining it, that would be a challenge, right? And how do you do that?
So this is a great question because this is a challenging task, because in a service you have different components of an organization contributing to the success of the service. So there is not just your, I don't know, hotline in case you got problems, but you also have marketing, sales, engineering. All of those components within an organization are um, acting for delivering one piece of the service. So you have sort of a vertical KPIs already embedded, which are typical KPIs from the different functions that are contributing to the delivery of the service. On top of that, you may have horizontal KPIs. They may deal with duration. They may deal with leads. They may lead may have to do with other success factors, which are
Mhm.
very peculiar to the kind of services that you are delivering. Because, for example, a service which is pure digital, like an e-commerce, have or a travel company. They have very different KPIs. They're very different service nature compared to the one of, for example, an insurance company. Uh,
Mhm. Mhm.
Sometimes you really need to be there supporting your customer all along this kind of journey they are performing from the very beginning to the very end of the interaction with the service. Sometimes you are invisible, you are silent, and you are just to be there just in the exact moment in which
Mhm.
the customers will need you. And this is, for example, the case of of an insurance company.
Yeah.
So
So yeah.
very peculiar, very different.
So another question that sparks up, Giovanni, in my head is, uh, every user is different, every customer is different. Their needs might be somewhat similar, but their emotional state once they are visiting that coffee shop or a person going to Amsterdam experience would be very different. So how do you ensure to, the design that you are doing and try to encapsulate all the needs over there? How do you manage various consumers and design a coherent experience for all the users? That must be a challenge, right?
It is. It is. Especially nowadays, in which the so-called VUCA world is
Hmm.
influencing the way we live, the way we consume, and it is very very challenging because everything is happening way faster. There is much more complexity to deal with. There is much more uncertainty. I mean, we're also living in, I mean, 2020. I'm not the one saying this. A lot of certainties that the world had have disappeared. So people are more unsecure. People are also having financial troubles at the moment. So how do you deliver this kind of value? How do you keep on having success if your customers suddenly disappear because, for example, people are not allowed to fly anymore? So in the process that we use, which is a creative process, while carry on service design or user experience projects, there are always moments in which we try to open up the our focus on a specific component, whether it is the focus on a problem or whether it is the generation of possible solutions. And in those situations, you may want to start from people. And one very important, probably one of the most important activity is exactly going out there in trying to address your customers. You may have different kind of customers. You may have users of your service. You may have customers. This role could be different sometimes. It could involve some payments, but not necessarily. But also in large organizations, you may have a pure B2B business relationship with your customers. So there you address another function in another organization. So at first you're trying to understand who are my counterparts. You try to understand what is their role. Are there other roles within this ecosystem I am addressing which may have an important say in the delivery of the value, and you may end up in finding managers hierarchy influencing your design. You may end up seeing defining ambassadors as well as saboteurs of your idea. But this is a preliminary work, which is important to understand what is the environment that we need to consider. Because of course, you need to shrink down, you need to start, you need to pick specific direction, which is, I have to be broad, but not that
Hmm.
broad, because you have a limited amount of time for executing your research. And so what you do is you try to collect data. So information which is already available through studies, through surveys and stuff like that, and you try to understand who are the major stakeholders, the most important roles in this idea that I would like to deliver, or in this area that I would like to explore. And then we usually start from organizing qualitative interviews. So going to people, asking about their specific preferences or their specific habits. Um, I have to say I do user research, I do participate, but this is a team sport that I don't do alone, because
Hmm.
there is always a team of designers involved, and each and every of us, we bring a specific competence in this. And one of the competences that we always bring in is a specific user research competence, meaning could be a market research, could be a psychologist, who is more expert in evaluating what people are saying, because I mean there are thousands of books and lots of theories about psychologies, applied psychologies, cognitive psychology, which is exactly aiming to understand how people decide, what are the subtext or subsets subset,
Text.
sorry, of parameters which influences the decision, whether they are financial, cultural, or individual. So this is very difficult. I'm not a really expert in this area. I am, so to say, I'm relying on what very smart colleagues of mine, as well as other practitioners out there, are suggestion to do. And but I leave also others having the major content point there, because the moment that in which you ask people what do they think about specific topics, they usually don't know what they need, and they, even if they tell you something, sometimes what they say they need is not really what they need in reality. And there is this famous say from Henry Ford about the faster
Yeah.
horses, and it could be, yes, in a sense it's inspiring. It follows a bit what is the approach, but on the other side, if people they would like to travel more faster, they don't necessarily have the horse in mind, or this is not necessarily a horse what you need to offer them, because this is just a I'm gonna say a representation of their perception of their reality. They can
Mm-hmm.
only think about what they know. They
Yeah.
cannot think about what they don't know yet, what is not there yet. And so this is the role of the designers, just to uncover this kind of needs, and then work on those insights to make them working in a way that they can address also the address innovation. So address also something which is not there yet.
Mhm. The other thing, once you talk about user research and bringing in the experts in, one of the latest things in the industry is to be looked at the jobs to be done.
Mhm.
So, what are your views in it? Do you also apply that once trying to undermine the needs, define what needs are, and then go deeper into identifying what job does a user has to do, and then come up with ideas?
This is just one approach, and this
Hmm.
approach is also valid. I mean, there are, well, probably one of the most important tasks that we do have as a design team is just to understand how do we want to approach the
Hmm.
whole thing. What is the framework that we would like to use? Usually, we prepare some sort of we call it a semi-structured guideline. So it's a set of questions which are open questions. So questions that have no yes or no as an answer. And we always carry on one interview guideline with us, in order to guide the customer in the direction they would like to explore. But on the other side, we are open to explore additional directions if the customer will provide us with the chance of exploring, or providing us specific hints that could be interesting for us. So there are several ways of doing this. Jobs to be done is definitely one. According also their linkage with the whole value proposition and business modeling design of Alexander Osterwalder. So this is definitely one approach. What you need to do is, of course, I mean, you don't just ask people what is your job to be done. Of course, you need to formulate your definition of jobs to be done in a way which is understandable for your customer. And then in a
Hmm.
post-production, so to say, you make sense. You try to sort out what is the most job, what is the task that those persons are accomplishing, what is the rating of the jobs, so that you can then use this information for understanding better what is the process, what is the customer journey, what is the how does the solution has to be tuned in order to address specific jobs, which are more important for specific customer groups. On the other side, you may want to use also a different approach, which doesn't necessarily refer to job to be done, and this is a more explorative, in which you just go and ask on larger topics. For example, you may want to understand what are the preferences in commuting of different customer groups, and
Mm-hmm.
in this kind of situation, what we also do is just that we extend the artifacts so that we are bringing into the user research activities, adding some items that can help to structure the thinking. So, for example, we may bring empty maps in which we may visualize the several, for example, times of the day, in order to understand when is that you are commuting and how you are commuting, what are the typical barriers that you have while you are commuting, and if you in order to enforce this visualization, because if people see it, they can better refer to what they are really doing.
Mm-hmm.
We may bring some, for example, some cards, um, which are presenting specific means of transportations, car, buses, bikes, whatever. Or we may also bring specific hurdles. So you bring in pictures of a queue, snow, stormy weather, or a alarm clock which doesn't ring in time. So stuff like that helps people to refer to specific problems, to specific situation, and this is very useful for. I mean, in one side, it makes this exercise a bit more practical on both sides, um, and on the other side, it helps the thinking about the specific situation. Helps people to just to focus, to understand. Oh, actually, there's much more than what I thought it is. Oh, I wake up, I drink my me as an Italian would drink my espresso and then dress up and I'm out. But if you think about it, your simple morning routine could be much more complicated
Yeah.
than this. Uh,
Yes.
uh, and this is also something we do also in a testing phase. So once the design concept is defined, and with defined, I don't mean it's ready. You have but we're always talking about prototypes, and then in what we also do and what designers also do is we are ambassadors of testing ideas early, as fast as possible, because we need to understand if we are on the right track or not. And
Mm-hmm.
still on a very qualitative basis, this is also the time in which you also go back to your users, you go back to the customers, and you collect feedback about what you have done. A lot of this stuff is very popular, of course, in a digital world. How do we test user interfaces? How do we test websites? But this is not just applied to this, because this you can apply this in also testing other components of your services. You may test the flow, you may test the story behind, you can test through a storyboard, but also you can derive experiments which are connected to specific component of your business models. So you can prototype, or you can experiment about your technology. You can experiment about the partners you are bringing in. Of course, you can experiment also on your financial, your revenue, or your losses, as well as, of course, important components which are very prominent, because those are the components of your services, the touch points that you have, that are making your service visible to the eyes of your customers.
Fantastic. Thank you. That goes quite deep into how you're designing the things. Another thing, Vani, I want to talk about is one of the things that is very prominent with the statistics is called the statistician's dilemma as well, wherein the sample size that I am taking to validate a hypothesis, how do I choose or how do I know that I'm taking the correct sample size when I'm going towards my user research? There might be five different personas that are interacting with my offering that I'm placing in front of the customers. How do I define how many number of people do I have to interact, view, or interview in order to come up with an optimal sample space so that my service design might be correct?
Yeah, this is of course you need to do a trade-off, and this is a decision that you may want to take together with your product owner or with your sales. I mean, this is not just the designer teams deciding, oh, this is something nice to have, but exactly, this is part of the data you need to collect at the beginning in order to understand what are the most meaningful customer groups that you may want to talk to, because of course you have a limited amount of time, and time is also related to budget. You cannot just explore each and every direction. The point is just to get significant representative uh, samples in order to get inspired, in order to collect insights. This is not the end of your exploration. Your explorations goes throughout the project in different forms. At the
Hmm.
beginning, you will define what is a meaningful but also manageable amount of personas or representative of specific personas group that you want to interact with. But usually organizations, they know pretty well who are their most important counterparts, and
Hmm.
that already would provide a huge support. Of course, you should also try to test extremes, like extreme users as well as non-users, just to understand what's hidden there. It could be also interesting for us to think a step further, and not just to be confined in the box that an organization is also trapped into, just because they are very expert in that specific business area with that specific customer segmentation. A nice trend there is also to explore cohorts or tribes, and this is way more heterogeneous than the so-called customer groups. They may have a more marketing approach, but this is just a group of people which are sharing the same interest. And in the recent times, they had also some. They have relevance because, for example, if you think about the amount of people doing yoga or interested in meditation or interested in running, I don't know, those are trends that were getting, so to say, consolidated in the recent times. And if you look about that, you have a huge variety of ages, of financial histories, rich people, poor people, young, old, women, men. It's very heterogeneous, but nevertheless those people are very connected through this strong interest that they have. So how do you organize your research also in a way that is then attracting this kind of how can I say, passion, rather than age, status, location, skin color, and everything else.
Is there something called disruption in service design as well? Because we hear about new technologies coming in and disrupting the existing market, like technologies like blockchain coming in that has got a fantastic future ahead, where the
Mhm.
existing monopolies are going to break and stuff. So when it comes to the service design, do you see certain examples or new trends coming in service design as well that probably might disrupt the existing way the businesses are being done?
Disrupting service design, or how the service design supports the disruption?
Both.
Both. Okay. Um, hmm. How service design is supporting disruption? I think getting a customer view for focusing on the first activities of any business trying to make something new, I think is the very first step that has to be done in
Hmm.
different ways, in different approaches, which are related to maturity of organization, and which is also dependent to the culture. I mean, there are several aspects, but I believe that this is still a very fundamental approach that is always valid to start with
Hmm.
and to keep a product ongoing. And this, of course, has not necessarily something to do with the disruptiveness of stuff, but also disruptiveness. I mean, what is that? Sometimes the markets are just disrupted because of an entrant which is able to offer the same quality at the very lower price point. So on the other side, on this, in other examples, it's about the degree of innovativeness of the product itself. So it's always a huge span. So to say, I believe that the idea is still the most important thing. But of course, approaching this idea from having a customer perspective since the beginning is a fundamental way of probably testing the level of disruptiveness and also pivoting the level of disruptiveness along the life cycle of this business idea. And about the practice itself, service design is like UX design. It's pretty new. It's a practice which has, if you really want to root down to the very initial papers defining this, it's about 15 years old, but it started to gain traction around 10 years ago. So the practice is still young. Could be disrupted by different probably could be disrupted by different how can I define this, different declination of the whole, because we have started mapping using tools for visualizing this complexity that services are bringing along. And now we realizing that this is a very broad exercise, because you need to encompass business and technology and customer needs, and this is a huge amount of complexity you need to deal with. So on one side, probably we need some self-design specialists in specific areas. On the other, and on top of that, we have realized as a self-design that there is always organizational barriers to deliver this picture that we have, a new service. And this is has to do with culture, heritage, willingness to collaborate, and you can deep dive in this, and you end up in pure HR topics, which is how people are so to say incentivized to collaborate together, for example. And those are hurdles that definitely play a role in the delivery of the service. That's why we are now seeing that there are people calling themselves organizational designers or happiness designers. So it's not really a disruption. Probably it's more a metamorphosis of something. But this practice is then trying to find its shape in order to then I don't know, probably again define specializing itself in specific areas, so that designers can better support in specific situations. Because in my opinion, what I don't believe is this kind of bold sentences saying, "Oh, we have an answer for every question." And I believe this is the wrong approach. Design can definitely support in understanding what possible answers are, but it does not derive stamps or does not derive bulletproof solutions. And design practice humility, design should practice collaboration, design should practice iterations, experimentations, learn as fast as you can in order to understand if you are on the right track or not. And of course, design always is an advocate for involving customers, involving user along this process, so that you have a constant discussion and a constant conversation about what you're trying to do and why you should do stuff in the way you believe it's the right one.
Interesting, Giovanni. Is that somewhat, once you talk about designing the service design, I recently saw a lot of LinkedIn posts that you have been putting towards a 30-day design challenge, and a lot of people participating in that challenge as well. What was that all about? And and what was the motive behind doing it, and what was the outcome?
Yeah. I think it goes together with the hand in hand with what I said before, to make stuff visual. To make, if you try to find a visual representation of something, whether it's just a picture, the right picture, or whether it's something you want to sketch on your own, this goes to me in the same direction. And the point is, how can we be better visual thinker? Because if you think about that, visualization could be a language on its own. It's a sort of a way we express our thoughts, which does not involve the mouth, but involves the hand and still the brain. And I got in touch with a fellow service designer, Mark, who said, "Okay, I know that you sketch, and I would like to be a better sketcher, but not just in practicing my sketching skills, but it's rather about the confidence that I do have in sketching." And he had a very nice analogy there, saying, because he's doing podcasts as well, and saying, the first time I did my podcast, I really hated my voice. I cannot listen to my voice when I hear myself. I think I have the most awful voice ever. But you do that and you get confidence in doing that, and at the end you get acquainted. So here the point was, how can we get people get acquainted also with their abilities in sketching, because I'm convinced that it's not about how good or what is your quality of the sketching, but to just overcome your fear, your lack of confidence for starting sketching, because at the end you really need a few lines in order to convey your message, even if it's a complex one. So in the 30-day challenge, what we have done was to provide with participants every day with a hashtag or a topic which was related to the design community. So one was collaboration, the other one was organizational silos, as well as co-creation, collaboration, business case. So pretty intangible things. And we have provided them with two important aspects. One was a time up. my my daughter was there.
No problem, no
Just
problem.
a second. I mean, you don't necessarily have to cut this because it's part of our everyday life
Yeah,
nowadays.
exactly.
And I don't want to feel. I don't really need to apologize for that.
Yeah, no, you don't have to actually.
It's what happened.
Yeah.
Talking about visualization, I if you don't know it yet, have a look at one of the latest the cover of the New Yorker, which is
Hmm.
really hits the nail. It's a fantastic representation of this moment, and this now that we are preparing to the end of the year celebrations and everything else, like pretending to look nice, looking at the camera while living in a in a bit of a
I
mess
don't
all
know.
around us. But that's perfectly fine. But nevertheless, what I wanted to say is that we have provided them with two important aspects. One was a safe space in which nobody had to feel uncomfortable in posting something which they would say, but I'm not really good in sketching. And so we had a sort of a closed group, um, in which we were posting every day, because there was the task. Every day we provide you with a topic and you have just 6 minutes for
Hmm.
coming up with a sketch. And we also, the second point was to provide guidance how to get to the sketch. And we have created this sort of a template in which we have tried to guide people in thinking how to sketch before starting to sketch. So
Hmm.
this template they had, first of all, scribble simply, let your hand flow, and then think about the topic and think about what are words which are associated to this. So we go back to cognitive psychology probably. because different people, they resonate with specific topics differently. And you see what was very interesting to me was to observe this thinking, because now you have a visualization of the thinking, if you like, how people are connecting dots, how they do a circling specific aspects which are more relevant for them. And once they have identified those, we did a sort of a variant of the famous Crazy Eight exercise. Say, okay, can you quickly pick four ideas? How could you visualize this? And then out of those four, then go for your final one, which will be your final, let's say, visualization that you are going to publish in the forum, so to say, on the platform. And it was interesting because we have around 370 people interested in this. And then you understand also your customer groups. Some are really the doers. They accept the challenge and they act almost every day for delivering. They taking the 6 minutes for publishing something. Others say, no, this is too much time for me. I can't do that. And others which are just the lurkers. They stay behind the scene. They probably like to look at what people are doing, but they don't want to interact. And we had around 30 daily active users, which was which was also fun because we had the chance of interacting also each other. We have providing also every week a bit of a hints about how to sketch specific elements, how to do specific stuff, and it was great fun because, as I said, you are interacting with a lots of people all over the world, which you cannot really otherwise interact with. So it was a great exercise for overcoming the Corona restrictions. You got a lot of contacts with people who are whether in the same field or whether just interested in being more visual, and so it was a great way to expanding our network, and it was a great learning, not just on how do you launch a challenge, but also in how do you get better in what you do, because I think everyone had his own learning there, which is not necessarily, oh, now I'm more confident in sketching, but also I feel I can better think. I find I can, or I do have developed a little visual vocabulary, and there was just amazing human touch. People saying, "Oh, I really enjoyed this." Or we have launched a similar initiative in Peru with a local Spanish community, and those are great things. I mean, this is personally speaking, this is what I really moves me in doing things. So we'll probably do it again at the beginning of next year. So stay tuned.
I wanna be a part of that as well. Please pull me in. I would like to learn how to sketch as well.
Will do.
Well, I saw a lot of good response coming over LinkedIn as well. So it was a good idea to just speak with you. What was that all about? And I say it would have been quite a bit of a life-changing experience in terms of sketching, for the people who had joined it for sure.
Yeah, this is if we want to wrap up a little bit. This is exactly what we have discussed at the beginning. So what people say is not necessarily say they do is not necessarily equal to what they really do, because at the beginning we had the short feedback there saying, okay, how confident do you feel? And most of them were, no, I'm not confident, and I don't really trust my sketching skills. And that's why we have created this isolated environment in which people will just post their stuff with a limited amount of audience. And what happened then? People started posting stuff on LinkedIn, and they were. It was amazing because they were so brave. Because people posting on LinkedIn, they probably were not the best sketcher, but nevertheless, they were confident enough to post this, having a way larger audience in comparison to the one that we have envisioned in the challenge.
Yeah, man, that's one of the skills that can go into the mainstream service design, where how you isolate people to unearth the real needs that they have.
Yeah, this is a fundamental aspect of another field, which is facilitating, which is guiding a team towards a goal. And one of the rules is always to provide a safe space so that people can experiment without having the fear of failing.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Giovanni. With that, we sort of come to an end to this conversation. It's been almost 45 minutes that we have been speaking non-stop, exchanging ideas about how service design is, how people work, and really interestingly to learn from you as well. I'm going to do a quick summary of what we had learned, and with that, after that, I'm going to ask you to do a quick summary of the thing that you would and one takeaway that you would like our listeners to listen to. Overall, net, what we learned, Ronnie, is that uh, the service design is one of the critical areas of designing how my consumer interacts with my service, and there might be tangible and intangible areas around it. How do you choose a sample size? How do you choose the experts who do the interview? And how do you design those interviews and then unearth the needs? It's a typical process around it. Overall, there has been this is a new field with a lot of disruption possibilities, and I see the whole focus towards the experience of how people interact with the services taking the mainstream. I think net that's the key takeaway that we should get away with from this conversation. And I'll ask you to do a quick summary before we leave.
Yeah, only summary is that I really appreciated this conversation, and my only message is that even if you believe to act in a very complex environment, just find a minute for stepping back and thinking about who are my customers, what should I offer them, and thinking about how to involve them throughout your product, I would call it like this, development cycle, so that you can learn with them, so that you can really, in a sort of an agile way, test often your prototype, do experiments of your idea, and this is a fundamental starting point in any innovation innovation process. I believe I would wrap it up like this. And if you would like to have some practical approach to practical approach to how to do user research and interview your users, you can follow this book from Steve Portugal, which I really like and suggest, which is called Interviewing User from Rosenfeld Media.
Thanks, Giovanni. Thank you for coming to Thinking Psychologist podcast. It was a pleasure having you. We sure have learned a lot from you today. We will
Thank
be in
you,
touch.
and thank you for the invite. Thank you for having me here, and yes, keep in touch, definitely. Thank you,
Definitely,
Ash.
Giovanni.